Welcome, nerdy knights of the well-rounded table, to Bohemian Geek Studies, where we take extremely dorky dives into our favorite fandoms. I'm Queen of Queries and Defender of Droids, Sara O'Connor. Welcome.
Hello there. I'm Colleen McMillan, Jedi Master and Rebel Scum collaborator.
And I am Pirate Jedi, Anders Drew.
We truly run the gambit in here in terms of rank, from Padawan to Master, and apparently Pirate to Master. But no matter what rank you carry, one thing remains constant. Much to learn we still have.
Very true. So today on Bohemian Geek Studies, we are starting our exploration of the character Sabine Wren, who was voiced by Tia Sircar from 2014 to 2018 on Star Wars Rebels. As always, this episode contains spoilers for all 4 seasons of Rebels and potentially beyond. So if you haven't watched Star Wars Rebels yet, and Colleen hasn't managed to track you down and force you,
like the Mandalorian that we're going to be covering.
Go watch Rebels and then come back. And if you have, grab a drink from the cantina, sit back and unwind as we engage your mind exploring this magnetic Mandalorian. All that being said, let's punch it. So, since context is key, Sara and Colleen, can you guys start us off on top of the Wayback Machine and give us a little bit of context around women and representation in Star Wars?
Yeah, sure thing. And to give credit where it's due, a lot of this research came from you, Anders, so thank you very much. To kind of kick things off, beginning in 1977, when Star Wars first premiered, young women and older women were treated to a sassy, smart warrior princess in the form of Leia Organa. She never missed with a blaster, which was something that George Lucas would later show on is like a trait that she inherited from her mother, which is really nice. Mm-hmm. And she was a well-respected military leader and a smooth-talking diplomat, all rolled into one.
Mm-hmm. Queen for eternity.
Yes. Throughout the original trilogy and through the later sequels, Leia was a absolute key figure. She would evolve over the course of the original trilogy, several tie-in novels, and the new trilogy from Princess in Need of Rescue into a rebel leader, New Republic senator, resistance general, and Jedi Knight. Wild.
I love her.
So much going on with her.
NBD.
She's basically just the boss of everyone. I mean, that's not to say that there isn't anything to criticize about our favorite space general or her role in the story. Well, she's undoubtedly a force to be reckoned with. Star Wars has long been plagued by criticism about equally representing women in its stories. Shocking, especially diverse women. Carrie Fisher was always very candid about being required to lose weight for the role.
Which is consistent for many women.
Yes.
Yeah.
Across the board, especially early on. And shockingly, or not so shockingly, even in 2016. She was in an interview with Stephen Colbert about being 19 in 1977 and playing Leia for the first time.
She was only 19.
19.
Wild.
I mean, Mark Hamill was young too. But yeah, both really so young. Quote, "The first movie I had, I guess you'd still call it baby fat." I love Carrie Fisher.
I love her. She was so great about all this.
Yeah. She's like, I would like to call it that, but it was probably just fat.
Like, so what? Yeah, doesn't even matter.
Oh,
well, so what was.
Exactly. So they sent her to a fat farm where they harvest fat.
Wild.
Unquote. She would also later admit that she was pressured to lose weight, about 35 pounds, for her role in The Force Awakens. So it's still here in the late 2010s about losing the weight when you're a lady.
And to be fair, not just ladies. Like, there have been some recent great articles about men who have been brave and smart enough to come forward. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's very sad. Like, really? It's 2020, y'all. We can get past that. Unfortunately, also, the main storyline that many of us remember from Leia in Star Wars isn't her razor sharp wit or her like fantastic blaster abilities, which we should be looking at. It's only about how those things inform her romantic relationship with the lovable rogue Han Solo, or maybe her retconned into incest kiss with Luke.
So weird.
So weird when
I know
you go
how
back
you love
and
a good
watch
retcon,
Empire.
Colleen.
So weird.
I mean, some retcons I'm fine with. This one, it's just George didn't know where he was going, and that's fine. And speaking of the Force weight loss, don't get me started on that fucking gold bikini.
Yeah, I mean, she looked absolutely fantastic
looked
in it.
great.
Let's be
She
Fanboy's
clear.
gonna
looked
dream.
Great.
But I loved her response to Insider when they asked her about how, like, when parents come up to her and are reacting to that whole deal. And she said, quote, when parents said they didn't know how to explain toys that depicted Carrie Fisher in the gold bikini costume to their kids, she said, quote, tell them that a giant slug captured me and forced me to wear that stupid outfit, and then I killed him because I didn't like it, and then I took it off backstage. Like,
Hot Slayer.
so
Boss.
good. It's so good. But Colleen, let's
love
switch
her.
some gears and look at where we are in more recent years.
Yes. I mean, Disney and Star Wars have made very noticeable, if not always successful, efforts to attempt to develop strong female characters that can be looked at as role models for young women across the world. We were introduced to a slew of ladies. I love all these lady characters. We have Padawan Ahsoka Tano and Sith Assassin Asajj Ventress in Clone Wars, both fantastic ladies. Jyn Erso in Rogue One. Rose and Rey, of course, in the new trilogy, the sequel trilogy. And one of my personal favorites, Captain Hera Syndulla in Rebels, Sabine's mom, pretty much. But today, we're going to focus on one of the most interesting, and there's an argument for most important new characters, especially in terms of representation. Another member of the Ghost Crew, like I said, Sabine Wren.
Yes,
Yeah.
Sabine. So to just get an idea of what Sabine has meant to Star Wars fans, we're going to take a look at a post that Bria Lavorgna, who's a guest writer for the website Nerds of Color, wrote back in November 2015, entitled Spark of Diversity, What Sabine Wren Means for Star Wars, that just kind of summarizes her feelings around The Mandalorian and seeing her on screen. So she says, I wish that I'd been born later. I wish that I could have had the opportunity to watch Star Wars Rebels as a kid and see a teenage girl who looked like me up there on the screen. I wish that I could have had a chance at a younger age to watch an Asian woman be an integral part of our team of heroes with no one commenting on her race or gender as she blows things up to stop the enemy, artistically. I wish I'd been able to see a capable lady in the Star Wars universe who looked like me and who did more for the plot than serve as space scenery. I wish I'd had that extra positive reinforcement that Sabine will give all of these young girls out there. And then she continues to go on and she discusses what it's like to go to cons and see Sabine cosplay, especially when it's like a young Asian girl, and what that means to her.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really appreciated her perspective because as much as we wanted to highlight it, it's not exactly as though read the room, we can speak to it personally.
No.
And
Gender, yes. Race, no.
Right. And speaking of
Me neither.
cosplay, in a 2017 interview, Tia Sakar flagged the cosplay as the coolest Sabine-related fan creations she's seen so far. And I love this because I've gotten to go to like some Comic-Cons and it's just fantastic energy. So she says, getting to see people cosplay Sabine is such a thrill and an honor for me. I feel like everyone who does the cosplay, everyone just kills it. Like, yes. They do the different seasons' hair. I'm so impressed every time someone sends me a picture from a convention somewhere in the world and there's this Sabine fully decked out. It's a huge joy for me to get to see people from all different backgrounds. I've seen little kids cosplay Sabine. I've seen adults cosplay Sabine. That to me is really gratifying, end quote.
That's just such a cool...
Great energy.
Such good energy. And again, so on the topic of Tia Sarkar, whose parents are both originally from Calcutta, India, some of you guys may know her better by sight as Real Eleanor / Vicky on The Good Place, where she just does a hilarious turn.
Yeah.
If you haven't watched The Good Place, go watch it.
I love
It's
her on that
absolutely
show.
worth it, especially during quarantine. It's such good comfort food. So in the last few months, there's been a lot of renewed scrutiny around animated characters of color being voiced by white performers. from
Yep.
Netflix's Big Mouth, Apple Plus's Central Park. There have been white actors who've been stepping down to allow actors of color to voice those roles. Even shows we all cherish, Avatar: The Last Airbender, is not immune from this with its voice casts. Alison Brie, who voiced the Vietnamese character Diane Nguyen on BoJack Horseman, a show I know we here absolutely are obsessed with and want to cover at some point, has come out and said that she does actually regret taking that role
Yep.
when a Vietnamese actress could have been given that opportunity.
Right.
So all that is to say, we do want to recognize that Sabine is a woman of color being played by a woman of color, and that is a step on the right path.
Yep. Absolutely.
If only one step.
Yep.
All it takes
And
is one step.
it's true. One step after the other and just keep marching forward. Speaking of which, in the 2017 interview I mentioned earlier, where she discusses Star Wars Rebels and her hopes for the future of Sabine, she shared that, quote, I didn't get to see a lot of those characters. I didn't get to see superhero characters who look like me when I was growing up. Very much reminiscent of the author from earlier, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I can contribute to changing in some small way for younger people now, that's hugely important to me. Representation is so important. Star Wars is kind of on the forefront of having tons of female protagonists between the live action films and animated series. I mean, there's an Asian female lead actor in the next one, and that's so exciting. I love that Star Wars is on the forefront of making the face of what heroes look like change.
Yes.
Can she just talk all the time?
Yes, I love her.
You love
She's
her.
fantastic. She can do all the interviews. We do love how diverse the Ghost crew is. We just finished covering Ezra Bridger, Sabine's younger counterpart, who's also a person of color. It's great to see the creators stepping outside the box and just not having a bunch of white people save the galaxy.
Yep.
In the Ghost crew, it's only Kanan who's white. So, like, yay, good job.
That is definitely, but it's stuff like that that just really makes me wish. I mentioned this at the start of the Ezra pods, that I wish Rebels had more fanfare when it was on. Like, it didn't get this splashy release as the first new Star Wars series when Clone Wars first premiered, or when Netflix saved it, or when it came back on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
And it obviously didn't have like this big splashy marketing budget or a marketing campaign that the theatrical films get. So while we're celebrating Sabine as a step forward on the representation front, unfortunately, the more public steps have been mostly backwards. I think we'd be extremely remiss while we're recording this if we didn't mention John Boyega's really recent interview, where he detailed his frustrations that, The Force Awakens was coming out and he was really front and center in the marketing campaign. We have got a black lead in the center. He's going to be the focus. And then as that trilogy goes on, he and the other characters of color are progressively sidelined more and more to make room for the white characters. A character like Rose is almost entirely cut from Rise of Skywalker.
Right.
And Kelly Marie Tran was pressured to leave social media over this toxic white masculinity hate being thrown her way for, daring to be a non-white woman in a prominent Star Wars film.
Right.
So,
choice
and
words
it's really
for those people.
A lot of choice words, and it's just really frustrating to look at that, to see that Disney and Star Wars are capable of developing these great characters, but they don't get to be in the front and center of the big splashy marketing events. They're still kind of relegated to the sides.
Right.
So, as with everything when it comes to equality and representation, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, possibly more.
Yeah.
It's like Ming-Na Wen's character in The Mandalorian. I really hope she wasn't around for just 1 episode to be killed.
True, but I also have secret hopes that maybe she was, and then they just recast her as a much older Sabine.
Oh, that would be amazing. I am here for that.
I'm absolutely here for that.
Ming-Na Wen in everything, please.
Ming-Na Wen in everything. And she's got time now because Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. finally ended.
Exactly.
God, that was such a good finale. Other topic. With all of this kind of in our heads, with all of this in our heads now, with all this context, let's actually get into this detailed dorky dive with a brief history of Sabine Wren. So, Colleen, you want to take it away?
Yes, of course. Sabine is a Mandalorian of Clan Wren. During her youth, she enrolled at the Imperial Academy as a cadet, because that's just what you did if you wanted to advance. Yep. Eventually, she did desert. Anything. Yep, if you wanted to do anything, you had to basically go to an academy for the Empire. Sorry, y'all, that's what you had to do. She did eventually desert after a weapon that she designed was turned against her own people. After her desertion, she was marked as a traitor by both her family and the Empire and Mandalore.
Tough break.
Yep.
Not great.
Tough luck for our girl.
And because she stood up to them, so of course she's a traitor. Eventually, she became a member of the Ghost crew, though. Her new family. She served as an engineer and a soldier for the crew, making her mark all over the ship.
Wait, literally.
And on places she visited with her art, of course, for which she always has a passion, which was encouraged by her father, which is adorable. And I know we're going to talk about him at some point.
Oh, those are some great scenes.
And this is kind of her like political activism coming out, her anti-propaganda, if you will, the awesome graffiti that's all around Lothal and other places that they visit. It's just great. Sabine would remain a member of the Ghost crew until she eventually returned to Mandalore, wielding the legendary Darksaber.
Yeah, incredible.
To help reconcile with her family and unite her people. She would return to the Ghost eventually, though, to help liberate her friend Ezra's home planet of Lothal. After the planet was saved, she stayed behind to help protect it in case the Imperial reprisal came.
Which it never did.
Thought it would. It never did, but they were very sure it would. After the fall of the Empire, Sabine sets out with Ahsoka Tano, girls trip, on a presumed search for lost Ezra. I'm here for all the frickin' girls road trip. Sabine,
yeah, I would love that. Yeah, that series has to happen.
Yep. Yeah. Sign me up. Sign me all the way up for that.
Yes. So for me, Sabine just stands as one of my absolute favorite characters in Rebels. And in this series, we decided we want to focus on 3 roles Sabine takes on throughout the course of Rebels and how they really interact with each other and work together to create this amazing, unique character. And Colleen, you kind of hinted at all 3 of these before. Sabine plays the role of the warrior, the engineer, and the artist. So for today, Sarah, would you get us started, please, with Sabine's role as a warrior?
Yeah, and I think for the next 2 episodes, or next episode, we'll be covering her other sections. So if you're excited about her concept as a warrior, buckle in. I mean, when she first blasts onto the scene in the series premiere, we are primed to expect her to be an absolute boss of a fighter. Yes. We, as viewers, are primed so brilliantly to know all too well what that armor means. And so throughout the history of Star Wars, one thing you can say about every Mandalorian we've met is this: they are absolute fighters.
Yes. Every single one we've come into contact with. Boba Fett, Jango Fett, Mando, Bo-Katan. We've never met a Mandalorian at this point without that warrior spirit. So, you know, the series premiere of Rebels comes on, you're seeing these kind of background people start to interact with each other, and instantly you recognize that helmet. You see the Mandalorian, and you're just like, all right, her armor's like bright pink and purple, but you know that she's going to be important and that she's going to be able to hold her own.
Yeah, absolutely. Even the tragic Duchess Satine from the Clone Wars, while a strict pacifist, was still a fierce believer and political fighter for her people. So I mean, no matter what role or function Sabine is going to be doing on screen, we already know she is coming to play, and Sabine is no exception in this tradition. In the season 1 episode Out of Darkness, it is her quick thinking and strategy that allows her to use several canisters, and I love this, of highly explosive, and tell me if I'm pronouncing this wrong, Rhydonium?
Yes, good job, Sarah.
Ooh, the pronunciations make me nervous, so like, mea culpa whenever I get them wrong.
Can't wait till we get to Thrawn, and I have to say his full name. That's going to be fun.
As a means of holding off waves of fear knocks and buy time for the Ghost to come to the rescue. Her strategy game is so strong. I mean, she would make a good quarterback, let's be honest. Out of the box thinker and innovative. And I would say kind of lethal from the jump.
Absolutely. I mean, she's she's kind of placing these canisters, and she is not missing a shot. She is absolutely primed to be lethal and beat these creatures back until for as long as they need to.
She's had very good training.
Yes.
In other words, especially since she's only like 16, 17 at this point, which is insane.
Which is
during
hard
the
to
trials,
remember. Yeah.
I know, right? They're so young. It's crazy. I always thought she was older, and they're like, she's 16. Like, oh,
Yeah, she's only like a year old. She's almost Ezra's age,
yeah,
right?
year older than Ezra.
Year or two.
Mm-hmm. Still craziness.
Mm.
This is also one of our favorite arcs, the Trials of the Darksaber arc in season 3.
Yes.
We get to see Sabine's warrior nature and training come into full focus in these episodes. Having retrieved the sacred Darksaber, she trains with Kanan and Ezra to learn how to wield the weapon and unite Mandalore against the Empire. The fact that she can wield a lightsaber at all with any ability without overt force sensitivity is amazing. Like other characters, including fellow Mandalorian Pre Vizsla, can wield it, but it does take some degree of force connection and manipulation in order to use it.
Yeah. And so for anyone watching or listening who is still not quite familiar with the Darksaber, just a super brief background history on it here. So the Darksaber is an ancient and, as far as we know, absolutely unique lightsaber of Tar Vizsla, who was the first Mandalorian Jedi. It's marked by its very large flattened hilt and its broad black blade. The Darksaber is a sacred relic of Mandalore, with Vizsla's family stealing it back from the Jedi Temple after his death. Throughout Clone Wars and Rebels, viewers have seen it change hands from Pre Vizsla, the leader of Death Watch, to Colleen's favorite bad boy, former Sith Lord Maul, and eventually Sabine. The Darksaber is a symbol to the Mandalorian people, and those who we have seen who have the skill to wield it are very rare and are worthy to be seen as leaders by the Mandalorian people as a whole.
It's pretty much their Excalibur, no?
Yes.
It really is.
Yeah.
Like, if you can find it and if you can successfully wield it, you are like, you
the
earn that
Mandalore,
respect.
kind of their cultural spiritual leader, basically. Which Satine was not. She was not the Mandalore, but she was still the leader. It's a lot of strange things going on in Mandalore culture that I'm sure we'll cover at some point.
Yeah, they also just, hand it over to Maul at some point, because why not?
I mean, Maul does beat Pre Vizsla.
Yeah.
But he's not a Mandalorian.
He earns the right to wield it, but that's why the factions break there.
It's a very Dothraki passage of, like a little blip on the Darksaber timeline.
Exactly. Well, freaking Moff Gideon has it now, so that's just not okay either. I'd rather Maul have it. But back to Sabine.
Tell us about her training to use this weapon.
Yes.
While she's training to use the Darksaber, she's forced to face her inner demons and admit her fears and regrets about her past. We'll delve into the specifics on the regrets in our next episode when we discuss Sabine's role as engineer.
And this training too, we just get some of the absolute best relationship building banter between Ezra and Sabine.
Yes.
Along with Kanan's, not so subtle reminder that the Mandalorians are absolutely great fighters and all, but the Jedi won that war. There's that great point. She's got her anti-force user helper weapons, and he just puts her down and he's like, remember, you lost.
Yeah, we won that war though. Dunk. Oopsies. Kanan's teaching style.
Definitely something we'll have to talk about later.
Yes. Because damn. We'll get to Kanan at some point. But Sabine, she ultimately reconciles with her family. She has to best Gar Saxon in single combat. He is the current leader of Mandalore, earning her place back at her mother's side and showing off her impressive fighting skills. In the meantime, Sabine is a warrior of skill and honor, and she has earned the right to be considered alongside Star Wars' most fierce fighters. I'd say she's probably top 5.
She's almost definitely top 5. And she's just that whole fight with him on the ice is just so cool and so beautiful. And everything about it is just amazing. So we're talking about Sabine as the warrior, and that's not to say that the warrior woman kind of archetype is new. Obviously
Right.
not.
Mhm.
You know, there's Katara, Korra, and Toph from the Avatar universe.
Mhm.
We've already mentioned Ahsoka Tano,
Yep.
Wonder Woman, Xena. These are all instances of the warrior women.
Mhm.
But Sabine, I think, really manages to avoid some of the tropes that of the traditional warrior woman that a lot of these characters tend to fall into. You know, her costume is not just ridiculously skimpy like a Wonder
Right.
Woman or a Xena. They also
She has
make a
armor.
she has armor. They make a great play on this on the if anyone watches the Amazon series The Boys, the character Starlight,
Yes.
they make a great
Yes.
parody of that skimpy outfit as a quote unquote empowering thing.
Mhm.
In
And they
season
also
one,
deal with it
Super
directly, which is
empowering.
fantastic.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Sabine never really has those moments where someone is underestimating her because she's a woman, kind of like Katara has to deal with an Avatar. She
Mhm.
never has to stand up and prove her worth based on the
No.
fact that she's a woman. She never has one of those Hermione at the Yule Ball glow up scenes where all of a sudden we suddenly realize, oh, she's a girl.
Yeah.
Like
When
she
her
hasn't
hair
been this whole
changes, it's
time.
just because it's cool. Like, it has
Yeah.
nothing to do with her, like, having a Save the Last Dance thing.
She has her own like degree of femininity and her own style.
Mhm.
And that armor, she absolutely makes her mark on it. It is unique to any Mandalorian armor we've seen so far,
Mhm.
but it's still an instant indicator that she should just be respected for her skills straight off the bat.
Yep.
There's no like big, huge, hunking guy who comes in. He's just like, oh, this is going to be easy to fight. And then she ends up kicking his ass. She never has to deal with any of those comments. Ezra never makes a comment to her that's like, oh, you're strong or you're good for a girl.
Right.
Mhm.
She never has to do with that. You know, we get some of the awkward teen flirting,
Yeah.
but it's not really on the same
They don't
level.
have too many options as well.
That's
Let's
very
be
true.
honest.
This is true.
Ezra sees her as like this formidable person from the jump. He automatically respects her. Like even when he's trying to flirt with her, he's like, "Whoa, she's hot because she's this badass woman." It's one of the reasons he likes her so much is because she's this capable person.
Yep.
Yeah. And she has absolutely no problem just be like, yo, don't got time for that. Maybe I'll toy with you a little bit, but
Away.
it's okay.
Go over there, please.
And you know, we've been talking about Sabine as a means of representation and why that's important, but bringing actually some real world context around this idea of, you know, quote unquote warrior women, it's just extremely timely to look at someone like Sabine, given the strides over the last, I mean, realistically over the last like 70 years, but of the last several years, the strides that women are making in terms of taking a more active role in military operations. So going all the way back to World War II was the first time that countries were just absolutely desperate for soldiers,
Yeah.
and they started opening posts up to women for the first time. The US allowed women to fly military planes for the first time during World War II. And Russia was actually the first country that had women flying combat missions. There's an amazing episode of Drunk History on this. I highly recommend you look it up.
I love the Russian women fighter pilot stories.
Yes.
Amazing.
It's a fantastic story.
So
cool. So, you know, now again, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Women got some of these roles and recognition, but after the war ended, the roles were scaled back significantly in the United States. In fact, in 1948, Congress passed a law that legally limited women to making up only 2% of the US military.
Such bleep-fitting
Hello,
bleep blop.
1950s. Yay.
Eventually, that was repealed and that limitation was overcome. But as of 2013, women still only make up about 15% of the US military, despite being 51% of the population, I think. 2013 also saw the US officially lift its ban on women in combat roles for the first time, which good step, but again, that is much later than many of our allies lifted their own bans, I have to note. So today, women and other genders for that matter continue to fight to secure their rights around serving in the military, while also fighting against cultures of silence around toxic masculinity, sexual harassment, sexual assaults, and everything associated with that. And, one of the major ways to fight those types of cultural battles, in addition to actually holding perpetrators to account, which is still something that there's a lot of work to be done on,
Yep.
is to provide characters and role models like Sabine, who can give inspiration and be role models for young people.
Yes.
So that kind of wraps up our discussion on Sabine as the warrior, but do you guys have any closing thoughts on that before we move into a little Master and Apprentice?
I love, the only thing I have to add is that I think it is so innovative and cool to have a Mandalorian fighting with art and having her art be explosive in impact, both from like a scientific standpoint, quite literally, but also figuratively. I think it's just so genius,
innovative
and genius to help show kids, since this is a kids show, right?
Yes.
Yes.
The power that art has, because then you see how Thrawn covets her artwork and recognizes the power of her father and her with fighting, not just with your fists in the traditional sense, but also being a warrior with one's art. And so
that's often more dangerous.
Yeah, yes. I have to tip the hat.
And I think we're going to go into a lot of detail on that when we discuss Sabine as the artist.
Yes.
What about you, Colleen? Do you have a favorite Sabine warrior fighting moment?
I've got a lot.
I would think nothing.
Almost everything. I know, right? It's all in my notes. I mainly love that no one takes her for granted because she's a woman, like we talked about before. No one is shocked when she's a capable warrior or a leader. Even other Mandalorians, like, they don't think twice about a woman being a leader. I mean, her mother, can you imagine somebody trying to send Ursa Wren home from war? No. That would so not happen. She'd form her own splinter group and end up taking over the world. Mandalore has this proud tradition of, she does, basically. She rules Cronus by herself, basically. She's like, really could use my daughter for this, but I guess I'll take my son, I suppose. It's not all that surprising, though. It's a strong step forward for women in warrior roles. My favorite moment is when she learned how to wield the lightsaber for the first time. They're on the family's planet Cronus, and Gar Saxon has the Darksaber. So Ezra like freaking hurls his own lightsaber at Sabine, and she catches it and just starts freaking kicking his ass all across that icy lake.
And that's
love
so
that
amazing.
Part.
That's such a great,
so it shows she can also use another lightsaber. She doesn't just know how to wield the Darksaber.
It's beautiful.
And it's just this. That's also a great like trust building moment between her and Ezra. That like
he doesn't even hesitate.
He's like, nope, she's got this.
Bam.
And that's also just an incredible moment. Apart from the stuff we just said, other than Han cutting open the Tauntaun, Sabine really is, Darksaber notwithstanding, as a couple of the users we've mentioned, the first really major non-Force user that we've seen wield the lightsaber. Finn technically does too, but he is officially retconned into being Force sensitive. Not really here for anyone's takes on that. We are not relitigating Rise of Skywalker.
Sorry,
no, Sarah, bring it on. Let's go. Let's do this.
Are we litigating retcons? Is that what's happening?
Yeah. No, that's clearly another topic for another day.
Yes, but even then, I have an explanation for how he could wield the lightsaber without Force-sensitive training. I have that.
He was trained, at least.
He was trained in hand-to-hand combat. Like we see stormtroopers with like vibroblade type stuff.
And so he would know.
At that point, Kylo had been shot in the ribs with.
Listen, we're not doing this now. We're not doing this now because I want to do it now, and we're not doing it now.
Segue.
Shut it down. Shut it down.
So, yeah, more than a match for him. She dispatches him, Gar Saxon, but she shows mercy. Interestingly enough, I also love whenever Sabine uses her sizable intellect to get out of tough scrapes, which I'm sure we'll talk about later when we get into her engineer stuff.
Yeah, she is very smart.
Yep.
So smart. She's always the smartest one in the room. I mean, Thrawn would definitely be having long conversations with Sabine.
Yep, and that's just,
I think at least once.
loops back to her incredible artistry, but that's again another topic for our next time.
Yes. So I think with that, we are going to kind of wrap up our discussion on Sabine the Warrior, and we'll get into, obviously, next time will be our episode on Sabine the Engineer. But until then, we want to know what you guys think. What thoughts or questions do you have about Sabine in general, her role as a woman, her role as a warrior, women in general in Star Wars? Let us know in the comments, email or tweet at us.
Hit us up.
Bring it
Do
on.
what you do. Slide into our
Ask us your
DMs. What
questions.
up?
Yep. Ask us all your questions.
Yes.
And before we wrap up, instead of doing it as kind of a last end chunk, it's time for a little bit of Master and Apprentice. Our friend Matt Harrington asked us if Sabine's mom was part of the Night Owl faction. Do you think Sabine would have grown up in the Death Watch Mandalorian faction if Maul hadn't interfered in Mandalorian affairs? Colleen, I'll respectfully defer to both of you two and just hopefully keep it kosher here. Why don't you start off with this one?
I definitely think that since her mother was part of Death Watch as the Night Owls under Bo-Katan, if they had continued to be in power, Sabine definitely would have been raised under this sort of umbrella. Her mom is still pretty militant. I mean, she doesn't need to be part of Death Watch to be kind of out there with her warrior ideas. It kind of happens in The Mandalorian also, where Din Djarin is rescued by Death Watch. We're not really sure where in the timeline this is, so it kind of makes you wonder how he was raised.
All that matters is this is the way.
Yes, exactly. This is the way. I think that Sabine definitely would have become a Night Owl.
I could see that.
Whether Pre Vizsla was alive or not, she still would. I mean, their clan ran loyal to House Vizsla, so they have that underlying loyalty going on there.
They do. I think it absolutely makes sense that she would have at least started that way. But given her defection from the Empire, her penchant for asking questions, that kind of natural inquisitiveness, I don't know if they would have been able to kind of train that or beat that out of her.
She would have gotten kicked out.
I think her good heart and her true innate sense of right and wrong would have still kind of won out in the end, and she would have ended up on a very similar path that she did.
I think she learned that from her dad.
She really did. Well,
that altruistic, artistic.
Altruistic, although he does say, that the creativity definitely comes from her mother.
Yes, which is funny. Like the talent is from the dad, but the creativity is from her mother.
Yes.
Love
all right. On a somewhat similar note, so Connie wants to know, and when she sent us this question, she was straight up just asking it straight to Sabine. So that's how I'm gonna read
which I appreciated.
I thought that was funny.
Yeah.
So she wants to know from Sabine, did you train with your mom growing up? Did she instill the ways of the warrior with you as a youngling? Was she super stern and never said I love you or anything, but showed it in how much food she hoisted on you and small, barely there smiles of approval? So
I almost want to just say yes, across the board, kind of. But there was one meal item, not all meal items, but there was the one meal that they understood. They had an understanding over.
The special
I don't know, because I think from what we've seen of the Wrens through the series, especially her father being kind of still a Mandalorian, obviously, but having that artistic side to him. And from what we do see of her mother, even if it was kind of tough love at times, I can't imagine that she never said I love you. I would think she would at some point.
She wouldn't just say I know. It would be
well, you never know with Ursa Wren.
Tucking your kid in at night. I love you, Mom. I know.
Well, I think that's kind of where we should leave it for today. Thanks for being with us, everyone. Come back next time when we continue our detailed dorky dive into Sabine Wren, less from the representation standpoint, but more into her role as an engineer. So remember, if you prefer to enjoy listening to us in our podcast format, then you can listen to us on iTunes, Spotify, TuneIn, or frankly, wherever you get your podcasts. I don't know. There are like a bajillion different places that you can do this these days. And in the meantime, please help us keep growing. Head over to our YouTube and click that subscribe. If you haven't already, do that thing and tell other nerdy knights to join us, because it really does help and it makes me happy. So thank you all for joining us today, and we'll see you next time. If you have any questions, comments, or theories about anything we've discussed, hit us up on Instagram, Bohemian Geek Studies. Tweet at us, Bohemian Geek Studies, or Geek Studies, and email us at bohemiangeekstudies@gmail.com. Until next time, Darksaber's up, and keep those episodes streaming. Thanks all.
Cheers. Thanks, everybody.
Cheers.